Developing right now on Morning News Now, Mother Nature showing no mercy. This morning, more severe weather pounding the south all the way to the Midwest with flooding, hail, even tornadoes. Near Kansas City, emergency sirens blared as the powerful storm spawned several suspected twisters. And it's not over yet. We're tracking the conditions, the warnings, and when we could see some relief. Also this morning, a war of words over President Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill after Elon Musk calls it a, quote, disgusting abomination.
Look, the president already knows where Elon Musk stood on this bill. It doesn't change the president's opinion. This is one big, beautiful bill, and he's sticking to it.
All this as the president's 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum take effect. We'll bring you the latest from Washington to Wall Street. Plus a troubling trend, more teens turning to popular weight loss drugs as America's obesity crisis grows. What doctors want you to know. And proud at work, a look at the unique set of challenges facing the LGBTQ community in the workplace. What employers and peers can do to show support.
An actual toolbox that'll come in handy for people, especially during this time right now, especially during Pride Month.
Exactly.
Good morning.
Practical information.
Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for starting your Wednesday with us. We're going to start this hour with the powerful storms that swept across the Midwest yesterday, causing flash flooding. Like in Wichita, we're going to show you where emergency crews were called in to rescue people who were stuck in their cars after they became submerged in the fast-moving flood water. The National Weather Service issued a flash flood emergency there. That's the highest level of flood alert that came after rainfall rates near 3 inches per hour.
The same system also spawned several suspected tornadoes across the region. This one hit Independence, Missouri, just east of Kansas City. The dark skies and rotating clouds had residents looking for cover, and the strong winds sent debris flying. This is Kauffman Stadium. That's where the Kansas City Royals play. The tornado sirens were activated just before this video was recorded. For the latest on those storms and what you can expect today, let's bring in NBC meteorologist Angie Lastman with your Morning News Now weather.
Yeah, Angie, good morning. So what can we expect today? More storms in the forecast?
Hi, guys. Good morning. Yes, unfortunately, we're going to have a chance for more storms, but the good news is it's not going to be quite as robust. We're not going to see as much of a widespread area dealing with this, but yes, a very active 24 hours, and you can see where that line of thunderstorms and that cold front is set up right now as we look at our satellite and radar. We've got some rain from the Great Lakes stretching down to Missouri. We've got a couple of these thunderstorms still centered across parts of Texas, and we've also got some kind of unsettled weather just off the southeast coast. We'll talk about that here in a moment. First, let's focus on the cold front. Notice that it's going to bring that rain kind of shifted a little farther to the east today. Michigan to Missouri is where we'll see the heaviest rain. It's where we'll see those storms today. And then we watch this area of low pressure that's trying to get organized just off the southeast coast. This is going to bring the potential for some heavy rain across parts of this region, not just today, but for tomorrow too, specifically across parts of the coastal Carolinas. That's where we'll watch for the potential for some flooding as we get into your day tomorrow. For today, the severe risk, I said, is much smaller. It's really just centered across parts of Texas and New Mexico where we could see that slight risk, and that means the hail, the wind gusts over 60 miles per hour, and maybe an isolated tornado. Otherwise, where you see the green, those are just general thunderstorms. So again, Michigan to Texas, parts of the southwest also included in that, stretching up into Colorado, but the severe threat much less than what we've been dealing with. Now, temperature-wise, that's going to get your attention if you live in the Northeast. We're feeling so summer-like. We've got high 80s on tap in Philadelphia today. We've got mid-80s for Norfolk, near 90 for Columbus this afternoon. Memphis expected to hit 90 degrees. And we keep that going for tomorrow, too. Potentially seeing some of these isolated record highs across this region, but upper 80s from Baltimore to Philadelphia to New York. And we'll keep the 90s in Hartford as well. These numbers anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees above where they should be for this time of year. So break out the swimsuits, I suppose. We've got cooler conditions, but only slightly cooler conditions on the way for the weekend. New York City bottoms out at 76 degrees for your high on Saturday. We end up back into those upper 70s by Sunday. And honestly, we keep the 80s for Washington, D.C., Louisville through the end of the work week and into the weekend. And we'll even see a couple of 90s out there across parts of the Carolinas. Now, one more note, we've got the wildfire smoke that we're still dealing with. You might have noticed the kind of fiery sunset last night in places like New York City. That's because, of course, that smoke is in those upper levels of the atmosphere. So we're still dealing with some unhealthy air, guys, across parts of the Midwest. That'll last here probably for another day or so. And we'll keep a close eye on it as those fires continue to burn, of course.
All right, Angie's covering it all. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Just days ago, Elon Musk was getting a send-off inside the Oval Office. Well, now he's criticizing the Republicans' so-called Big Beautiful Bill, the centerpiece of President Trump's domestic agenda. In a post on X yesterday, Musk called the bill a, quote, disgusting abomination and said, shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. House Republicans passed the spending bill last month by just one vote. The legislation is now in the hands of the GOP-led Senate, where changes are likely, and that means the House and Senate would have to sort out differences before sending it to the president's desk. House Speaker Mike Johnson reacted yesterday to Musk's criticism.
With all due respect, my friend Elon is terribly wrong about the one big beautiful bill. We had a long conversation, he and I. Spoke for, I think, more than 20 minutes on the telephone. For him to come out and pan the whole bill is to me just very disappointing, very surprising in light of the conversation I had with him.
NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell joins us now from Washington with the latest. Kelly, good to have you with us. So we know Elon Musk then doubled down later in the day on X saying, quote, in November next year, we fire all politicians who betrayed the American people. Those are pretty strong words. A source familiar with the Musk-Trump relationships telling NBC News there are several issues that are likely behind Musk's frustration that's coming out on social media. What more can you tell us?
Well, good morning, Joe. Certainly, he is no longer the special government employee where he feels bound to support the administration. It is really Musk unleashed here on his own social media platform. With respect to the reasons, there are those who are familiar with the relationship between President Trump and Elon Musk, who say there are a couple of factors, and some of them have to do with his own business interests, or the lack of the electric vehicle credits in this legislation. He also had been advocating for the FAA to use his Starlink satellite system as it deals with changes with air traffic control. Then it was Musk who had offered a friend as a nominee to be a NASA administrator. That was a nomination made and then withdrawn. And then, of course, the issue of his status as a special government employee. By law, that requires 130 days and no more. There are those who are saying that Musk wanted to stay on in some capacity, but the White House opted not to do that, so his government service is over. Musk's team did not respond to our request to see if those reasons do bear out, but it would give you a sense of some of the interests that Musk has and his concerns about this bill. But what is striking is, after being, pardon me, the president's most generous benefactor in terms of the campaign and obviously a very visible presence for the first months of the new administration, now a strong break on a piece of legislation that matters a great deal to President Trump.
Kelly,
Joe?
while we're talking about federal money, the White House sent a request yesterday to congressional leaders to pull back more than $9 billion in approved spending. Most of it's for foreign aid. This would flash funding to, or get rid of funding for the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, also NPR, PBS. Any obstacles in the way of this getting approved?
Well, this is called a rescission, and it is intended to try to take those Musk-generated Doge cuts, the slashes in departments and budgets, and make them permanent, because that was originally congressionally authorized spending. And this is the administration saying, now, we've made a decision to cut this. Will Congress support it? It is not easy, especially with the timeline. There's only 45 days for this kind of legislation to be approved. They're also dealing with the big package that we've talked about. So there are time pressures. These are conservative interests to cut foreign aid and to cut the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is NPR and PBS, and other things like that. It's the kind of stuff we've heard conservatives talking about. They want to make it official. Joe?
And Kelly, while we have you, let's talk climate here. So the Atlantic hurricane season we now know is underway. The White House is responding to something that was said by David Richardson. He's the acting FEMA administrator. Little background: during a meeting Monday, he said he was not aware of the hurricane season. He then said he was joking. What are we learning about all this?
Well, of course, the hurricane season is something that gets a lot of attention and would require enormous resources and coordination from FEMA if, in fact, we have devastating hurricanes, as we have seen in recent years. The question I posed to the press secretary at the briefing dealt with this issue, and because they have cut the size of the workforce and the administrator made this comment, does the president have confidence? Where does that stand? I had an exchange with Caroline Levitt, who says they take this seriously. Again, they think that that this comment about not knowing there's a hurricane season was a joke. Here's our exchange. Is he still comfortable with Administrator Richardson, who had talked, whether joking or not, about not being aware of a hurricane season for this country?
Sure. Well, of course, we know that we are into hurricane season now, and I know FEMA is taking this seriously, contrary to some of the reporting we have seen based on jokes that were made and leaks from meetings. But Secretary Kristi Noem and the FEMA leadership are all over this. They are committed to ensuring that federal resources and tax dollars are there for Americans in need.
Of course, President Trump wants a smaller FEMA and wants to redirect resources back to states. That could be a challenge if there are, in fact, these national level disasters that require considerable federal help. So we'll watch this as it plays out June through November for the hurricane season. Joe?
All right, Kelly, thank you.
Well, on the economic front, President Trump's new 50% tariff on steel and aluminum imports is now in effect. Canada, Mexico, and parts of Europe are among those that will be hit hardest by this new levy. The UK was granted a reprieve with the tariff remaining at 25%, while a trade deal with that country continues to be hashed out. The president says the move to double tariffs on metal imports protects the U.S. steel industry. Investopedia editor-in-chief, our friend Caleb Silver, is here to talk more about this. Hey, Caleb, good morning. So what kind of impact will this higher tariff on steel and aluminum have, especially if we anticipate other countries retaliating?
Yeah, and the EU might retaliate. They're not happy about this at all because they say this undermines the negotiations that they're having with the United States on tariffs right now. So if you go from 25 to 50% on tariffs, especially for countries like Germany and Sweden, which import or export a lot of steel and aluminum to the United States, this is pretty punitive for them. Other countries like the UK, as you mentioned, may be spared by this because they are in the economic prosperity deal inked on May 8th with the president. So they may be spared by it, but we have other countries that we import a lot of steel and aluminum from, namely Canada and Mexico. We have not worked out agreements with them yet. That could be very painful for them in terms of the steel and aluminum that are imported into this country. And then think about the automakers that are going to have to pay higher costs that are based here in the U.S. because of those higher tariffs.
Caleb, we've also seen the tensions between the U.S. and China worsen this week. This came after both countries were blaming each other for violating last month's Geneva trade agreement. That included that 90-day pause on most tariffs. Help us to understand what is going on here, and ultimately, are trade talks in danger?
Yeah, they could be. And the president saying this morning that having negotiations with China is becoming more and more difficult. No more Mr. Nice Guy, he said in quotes on social. Don't know what that means, but I think a lot of this is hung up over the rare earth minerals that China has so much control over. Those are minerals we use for auto production. Those are minerals we use for different industrial processes. And that might be the sticking point in terms of the negotiations, at least at this point. So we do have that 90-day reprieve with China. That is coming to an end in July, but the closer we get to it, the further apart these negotiations seem right now. They seem to be very good a couple of weeks ago when trade leaders met in Geneva. That seems to be falling apart right now, but anything can happen.
Caleb, remind us, all this back and forth uncertainty, what does it mean for a consumer, and what do we expect to see in the markets today?
Yeah, the markets are responding actually in different areas. There are good results from semiconductor companies out yesterday. So you've seen technology lead the stock market gains over the last couple of days. But we've kind of been in this choppy trading pattern because there is uncertainty now as we approach July 9th, the end of that 90-day reprieve. And there's all these other negotiations happening at the same time. It's very driven right now by headlines. Headlines are driven right now by trade negotiations. As those get more and more choppy, so does the market. But right now, the market's kind of been in a nice little groove, not really doing too much except for responding to the positive news out of the semiconductor sector. For consumers, you're going to expect higher prices, but we haven't seen those quite yet because those tariffs have not yet manifested. We're kind of in this purgatory right now, waiting for a lot of those to take effect. Steel and aluminum will be those very first ones that take effect today. We'll start to feel those in the next couple weeks.
All right, Caleb Silver, thank you so much.
One of the top prosecutors behind the January 6th investigation is speaking out, and he's warning that President Trump's sweeping pardons for Capitol rioters could have dangerous long-term consequences. His name is Greg Rosen. He led the Justice Department's effort to hold rioters accountable. Rosen sat down with NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley just days after stepping down, saying the pardons send the message that political violence is acceptable.
The prosecutor in charge of investigating the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol, sounding the alarm about the independence of the nation's top prosecutors and what President Trump's pardons say about political violence.
To celebrate that is a message to the American people that the rule of law may not matter.
Greg Rosen, sitting down with NBC News just days after resigning from the department he believes is becoming politicized. He oversaw the sprawling investigation, with much of the evidence captured by rioters themselves, including brutal assaults on law enforcement.
Those are screams that I hear in body-worn camera and in videos that are hard to shake.
Just logistically, how do you handle such an enormous investigation?
It was a Herculean effort by hundreds of dedicated prosecutors, legal support staff, thousands of federal agents, to get it right.
Rosen's Capitol Siege section was able to secure hundreds of convictions, and even more arrests were in the works. Despite Trump originally pushing for accountability,
to those who broke the law, you will pay.
He changed his tune on the campaign trail.
But that was a day of love.
After taking office, he granted mass clemency to roughly 1,500 Capitol rioters, including members of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers.
The underlying message of the pardons and the expressive nature of the pardons is that political violence is acceptable, particularly if it's done for a specific purpose. And political violence in an American society, in a constitutional republic, is essentially the brain rot of the republic.
Rosen also pushing back on the critics, saying that the prosecutions were well supported.
The reality is, every single case was treated with the utmost scrutiny. And so the concepts that these defendants were railroaded or mistreated is belied by the actual facts.
But his section was quickly shut down after the pardons. Rosen was then demoted to an entry-level position by Trump loyalist Ed Martin, who's now overseeing pardons at the Justice Department. Rosen saying in his resignation letter Friday, "I've learned trust in our institutions, like justice itself, takes decades to build and can quickly erode." White House spokesperson Harrison Fields telling NBC News that Trump, quote, doesn't need lectures from Democrats about his use of pardons, citing former President Joe Biden's pardoning of his son, and saying Trump was using his pardon and commutation powers to right many wrongs. But Rosen sees it differently.
It was appropriate, it was proportional, and it was righteous. And so I would not change a thing about the way we conducted ourselves.
Now he is worried about the brain drain at the DOJ and continued attacks on career law enforcement professionals.
Frankly, it's ridiculous that we are seeing retaliation being taken against people who did their job.
And the impact it will have on the justice system overall.
It sends a terrible message. It sends a message that every aspect of what you do will somehow be politicized, or the word I think that keeps getting used is weaponized. And that's very unfortunate.
And our thanks to Ryan Riley for that report. Rosen also says the cases were thoroughly vetted both inside the Justice Department and in court, with juries and judges from both parties weighing in.
The family of the man accused of the anti-Semitic attack on a march in support of Israeli hostages in Boulder, Colorado, is now in Immigration and Customs Enforcement custody. The Department of Homeland Security says it's investigating what the family potentially knew about the planned attack, which injured at least 12 people. According to the FBI affidavit, suspect Solomon says he acted alone. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky has the latest and warning some of the video is disturbing.
As terror suspect Mohammed Solomon sits in a Colorado jail cell, his wife and 5 children are now in ICE custody, according to the Secretary of Homeland Security.
We're also investigating to what extent his family knew about this horrific attack, if they had any knowledge of it, or if they provided support.
ICE agents taking the family into custody just days after the FBI searched Solomon's Colorado Springs home. After moving to the state 3 years ago, federal officials say the Egyptian national had overstayed a tourist visa, but did have a pending asylum claim. Authorities have not confirmed his family's immigration status. On Sunday, video captured the 45-year-old attacking a rally for Israeli hostages, armed with Molotov cocktails and a makeshift flamethrower.
It's shocking. It's disgusting. I mean, literally seeing this man throwing Molotov cocktails onto human beings.
We spoke to Boulder Police Chief Stephen Redfern, who told us once officers took Solomon to the ground, he continued his rant.
The quick response of our officers, community members, the fact that he had 16 other Molotov cocktails there and wasn't able to use those, That is somewhat of a win for us.
At his synagogue, where private security is now backed up by Boulder police, Rabbi Mark Soloway shared this is where 6 of the 12 victims come to worship.
How would you describe the last 36 hours?
It's been brutal, horrifying, exhausting, so many emotions, incredible sadness and grief and tremendous anger too.
He tells us 2 victims airlifted to Denver remain hospitalized. As for the man behind this attack, he has this message.
Look at the humanity of these people. I would want him to just see that he just saw lovely, beautiful human beings and destroyed their lives for no reason.
Our thanks to Morgan Chesky for that report. Will Solomon remains in custody on $10 million bond.
Now to the latest in the federal trial against Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah, yesterday, the jury heard new details about that disturbing 2016 hotel video, which showed Combs assaulting his then-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. As NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk reports, the testimony focused on the alleged effort to keep that video from emerging.
In federal court, focus on the shocking 2016 video of Sean Combs hitting and kicking his then-girlfriend Cassie Ventura in an L.A. hotel. On the witness stand, a former security guard at the hotel, Eddie Garcia. He says Combs knew the video would be damaging. Combs' assistant calling Garcia after the incident, asking for a copy, according to testimony. When Garcia said no, the assistant showed up in person at the hotel. Garcia testified that he told her to contact his manager at the security company. But then Combs himself called multiple times, sounding nervous, according to Garcia, and telling him the video would ruin his career. Garcia says he and his manager cut a deal to turn it over in exchange for money. He hand-delivered it himself to Combs. He asked if this was the only copy, Garcia told the jury, and I said, I believe so. Garcia says he signed an NDA. Then Combs handed him a brown paper bag with $100,000 in cash. Combs pleaded not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges. Among the federal government's accusations, the hip-hop tycoon used his business, including certain employees, to carry out, facilitate, and cover up his acts of violence. Even with the lurid accusations, Combs still has fans. A woman standing up in court screaming profanities and yelling, "It's not right what they are doing to him." The judge had her quickly removed. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Angela Sanadella. She joins us here on set. Hi, Angela. So this 2016 assault of Cassie Ventura, the video of it seems like it really is a central piece of the case here for the prosecution. Explain, though, from a legal perspective, how this alleged payment of $100,000 to try to keep this video from ever seeing the light of day actually relates to the specific charges that Diddy faces.
Right. So one of the charges that Diddy is facing is conspiracy to commit racketeering, right? And there you have to prove a conspiracy to commit a pattern of racketeering activity, which is really just almost as catch-all for other illegal activity. So one of the illegal actions that are being alleged here is an attempt to obstruct a police probe, attempt to criminally suppress an investigation by law enforcement. So what the prosecution are alluding to is that in giving this payment, they're really strong-arming in an illegal way the suppression of this video, which obviously does seem to include illegal activity, a beating of a woman from getting out and from being investigated by police.
That sets up my next question here, which is the defense is sort of making this argument that the NDA didn't keep Garcia from speaking with law enforcement. Talk about why they're making that argument.
Right. So the NDA seemed to include what is standard in really all NDAs, which is that nothing in this agreement prohibits a party from cooperating with law enforcement. So what the defense was trying to do here is say whether or not they didn't engage or participate in a police probe wasn't Diddy's fault. It was actually their choice. That Diddy was not involved in this. That's what they are getting at. But I also have to say that in the redirect, the prosecution, though, did note that there's also this provision that requires them to notify the company and notify someone who would be in Diddy's position, which in that case would possibly prevent someone from being willing to speak out if they had to notify someone who's an alleged criminal.
Absolutely. We also heard from a former senior executive at Combs' company, Bad Boy Entertainment. What did we learn there?
So we heard from the CFO and Derek Ferguson. This was instrumental because it proved a lot of corroboration here of Cassie's mother's testimony. So Cassie's mother, Regina Ventura, previously testified that Diddy had demanded that she pay him $20,000 in order to prevent sexually explicit images of Cassie from getting out. And so that could go to extortion, but that also could go to just this pattern of criminal activity, this pattern of suppressing information from getting out.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, we expect to hear from another one of Combs' alleged victims. She's being called Jane. She'll have her identity protected as well. What can we expect with this? Why is this important?
So we expect to see this, again, this pattern, which is really important for the prosecution to prove. So the prosecutors did foreshadow that we might see some sort of payment again happening, payment of rent, or kind of allowing her to stay in her house in exchange for her silence. And this sort of activity would again go to suppressing these victims from speaking out, and also to Diddy's company as a criminal enterprise that just continually does this, continually, allegedly, stops information of criminal activity from getting out.
Angela Sanadella, thank you very much.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, smartphones stolen and sold out of a vending machine. We're going to show you what happened when one of our own correspondents found herself targeted by thieves.
Up first, though, developing news, Ukraine launches another attack on critical Russian infrastructure. We'll be right back.
We're back with the latest in the Ukraine-Russia war. Ukrainian troops say for the second time in less than a week, they've launched an attack on critical Russian infrastructure. Ukraine's domestic security agency said it detonated 2,500 pounds of underwater explosives on the Crimean Bridge on Monday, sharing video footage of what it said was the detonation.
The agency said that the bridge, which is used by the Kremlin to transport military equipment, was in a, quote, emergency condition after the attack. This comes just days after Ukrainian troops executed that major drone attack on a Russian airbase deep inside Russia, which it says destroyed at least 13 air bombers.
NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now with more on all this. Keir, good morning. So just what else are we learning about this attack on the Crimean Bridge? And help us understand why this is such a big deal.
Well, there's mixed reviews on how damaging the attack was. So you mentioned there the Ukrainians say that they've actually damaged the infrastructure of the bridge. The Kremlin, just in the past few hours, saying nothing was damaged and accusing Ukraine of targeting civilian infrastructure. I mean, we should obviously mention that the Russians have killed thousands of Ukrainian civilians over this war. There were previous attacks, one just a few years ago, for example, that really ripped the bridge apart and took a long time to repair. The pictures of that blast are much more spectacular. That being said, we've been there. This bridge is very well defended, particularly from the air, so it is an audacious move. And another point about this bridge, it is one of President Putin's prized possessions, if you like. He was there for the opening of it. So now, in just 2 days, 2 stinging attacks on long-range, Russia's long-range bomber capability, and then on a crucial bridge. The message I think Ukraine is trying to send to Russia is negotiate or we'll hurt you.
And that being said, I mean, it's because it's Ukraine's second ambitious attack on Russia in less than a week. That makes sense.
Yeah.
In response to that large-scale drone attack that we mentioned just a moment ago, this was on a Russian airbase. Russia's former president yesterday, he said, quote, retribution is inevitable. Tell us more about how Russia is responding to these recent attacks and what you think we might see soon.
Well, we haven't heard from President Putin, which is interesting. You don't often hear from President Putin when he's kind of in a corner or something has gone wrong. That can be his way, which is not always the way that people think of him as kind of, you know, powerful autocratic leader. Sometimes he can almost go into hiding. Now, will he retaliate? Well, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has said that, yeah, it's inevitable, as you mentioned, and I think, frankly, it probably is. I mean, the really big question here is whether the Ukrainian ambition, President Zelensky and his team's ambition, to force Russia to compromise is going to work. based on what Russia, and we've talked about it, haven't we, in previous mornings, based on what Russia presented at the negotiations on Monday, it certainly is in no mood to compromise. In the long run, all this may push Russia to compromise. We should make the point, shouldn't we? 3 years of war, and so far, any pressure that Ukraine's managed to bring to bear on Russia has not had that impact.
Let's talk about where the peace talks stand. We saw a second round of talks between both countries in Istanbul Monday. No breakthroughs there. But we know the U.S. and Ukraine are still talking. Secretary of State Rubio expected to meet with Ukrainian officials later today. What more do we know about just U.S. involvement in these negotiations and where things stand?
Well, great question. We haven't heard, interestingly, from President Trump on these latest attacks. He was very vocal, wasn't he, day after day about Russia and Ukraine. Now he's not. So that's interesting. He has the capabilities, we know very well, to talk about it at any moment on, for example, Truth Social. Yes, the Ukrainians are in Washington. And the message they're trying to take to Washington is, look, you can see that the Russians are not compromising. So we do want more sanctions on Russia, and we do want security support. Look, I don't think it's likely that you're going to see the kind of Biden-era large spending packages, to sending support to Ukraine. But some of the questions are, will the US continue to allow Ukraine to buy weapons from the US? Will it continue to provide intelligence support for Ukraine? It does look as if the Europeans are getting ready to step into the gap as long as that kind of support remains. And there are senior and influential senators who think that the US should carry on that way. Big question again, it's all about President Trump so often, isn't it? Is he frustrated with President Putin, frustrated enough that he's willing to continue supporting Ukraine?
All right. Keir, good to have you with us. Thank you so much. Other world news, an aid distribution group in Gaza is temporarily shutting down operations today following a day of chaos that turned deadly. Reminder, this group is called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's backed by both the U.S. and Israel. Now it says it's closing aid centers in the enclave for the day after the IDF declared the area a combat zone. Now, the aid group says it needs to close the centers in southern Gaza for, quote, efficiency improvement work. The Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry says more than 24 people were killed yesterday after the Israeli military opened fire close to the center. The IDF says it opened fire after suspects approached their forces in a threatening way. A doctor at a nearby hospital told NBC News this was the third time in 3 days that Palestinians were killed in that area.
Police are restarting searches for Madeleine McCann, the 3-year-old British girl who disappeared more than 18 years ago while at a Portuguese resort with her family. The chilling case has captivated people around the globe and has remained unsolved. Now officials are hoping to get some answers with this latest search operation. NBC News international correspondent Molly Hunter has the story.
Investigators are returning to southern Portugal to the cold case that has haunted European authorities for nearly 2 decades. Back in 2007, the disappearance of British toddler Madeleine McCann captured the world's attention. Portuguese and German police were seen near the Portuguese resort where the 3-year-old disappeared. In a brief statement, German police announcing the renewed search, saying criminal proceedings are currently underway in Portugal.
The reason the Madeleine McCann case, missing child case, still is in the minds of the worldwide public, even 18 years later, is simply the nature of the facts around her disappearance. It is every parent's worst nightmare.
While on vacation with her family in Praia da Luz, the 3-year-old disappeared from her bed without a trace. Her parents, Kate and Gary McCann, were dining out in a nearby restaurant and had left Madeleine sleeping in the hotel room with her younger twin siblings.
Can you clear a pub?
The case sparked a media firestorm, and parents across the globe criticized the McCanns for leaving their children unattended. Throughout the years, officials releasing photos of what an older Madeleine might look like. And finally, in 2020, a main suspect was announced.
We know the identity of this male. We have nominated him as a suspect.
German police took the lead on the case, naming German citizen Christian Bruckner as a suspect in the murder of the British toddler, but he's never been charged. Bruckner spent years around southern Portugal, and he's currently serving a 7-year prison sentence in Germany for raping a 72-year-old woman in Portugal in 2005. He's denied any involvement in Madeleine's disappearance. This week's search comes 2 years after German and Portuguese authorities searched the Bergamo do Arade Reservoir. About 30 miles from the resort, they searched the area for 3 days without any breakthroughs. Last month, Madeleine's family vowed to keep searching, leaving no stone unturned as they marked 18 years since her disappearance.
The problem is that without a confession or the recovery of Madeleine's remains, we will never know the answer. The resurgence in the interest in this case and the search by police in Portugal, it really does show that they want to get those answers and bring the family some peace.
Well, thanks to Molly for that report. Well, Portuguese police say this new search will include a range of investigations, and it is expected to last until Friday. Coming up, more teenagers now turning to a popular weight loss drug.
Yeah, up next in our weekly checkup, a look at the rapid rise of Wegovy and what doctors want parents to know. Next on Morning News Now.
We are back with our weekly medical checkup. This week, we're taking a look at why more teens are turning to the popular weight loss drug Wegovy.
Plus, a new study suggests a daily serving of beans could help boost your heart and metabolic health.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. Vin Gupta joins us now to break it all down. Dr. Gupta, always great to have you with us. Good morning. So let's start with the spike in Wegovy use among teens. 50%, that's how much it's up in just a year. Do we know what's driving this rapid rise, and is there anything of concern here?
Yes, Savannah, good morning. Joe, good morning. What we've seen here is that prescriptions have spiked dramatically just in the last 12 months, mirroring this rise in obesity amongst children. And frankly, the fact that doctors just don't have a lot of tools here that are insurance covered to really provide relief beyond behavioral therapy. And so this is just a force of the reality here. It's been approved for kids 12 and up since late 2022. Access is still limited, but there are concerns here. And so it's important to keep in mind from a doctor's orders perspective to know the risks and the benefits. We don't know the long-term impacts of Wegovy on children, especially very critical development phase. And, this is not a replacement for healthy living. And so it's important to keep in mind that this is a tool, have a conversation with a pediatrician, but still a lot of known unknowns.
Well, let's talk about beans. A new study finds a cup of beans a day can help you avoid a trip to the cardiologist. So tell us, what makes beans so effective when it comes to our heart health, to our metabolic health?
Yeah, Joe, sort of another flavor of this study, we talked about the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet. Beans are a key source of both of those diets. And what we've seen is that chickpeas, lots of good, in this study especially, has been associated with lower cholesterol, black beans with lower inflammation. And so a cup a day, these studies are now clearly showing it has clear benefits to heart health, hopefully keeps you off medications potentially. And so this is something to keep in mind from a doctor's orders perspective. Rotate the types of beans that you have on your plate for variety, and vary up recipes as well. But this is something to really build into your diet because it's good for your gut health and now clearly good for your heart health.
It's, again, very specific.
There you go.
I like beans, so that's lucky. Dr. Gupta, also we've got this promising development in cancer screening. This is a big deal. Researchers say a new blood test could help detect colorectal cancer early. This is the second leading cause of cancer-related deaths at this point in the United States. How promising is this new test, and who could it be available to?
Savannah, I think this is hugely consequential. About 35% of Americans do not get colonoscopies as we'd like them to, as recommended, because you know what? Colonoscopies are not pleasant things to get. You have to prep for them. It's uncomfortable, and we understand that. So this new test augurs something different. It's 80% sensitive, 90% specific for the detection of colorectal cancer. That's pretty good. It gets better. Unfortunately, it seems to get a lot better if somebody has more advanced cancer, because this is detecting DNA fragments of a cancer that's already established in the blood. Not as good for early stage cancer. So for a doctor's orders perspective, really have a conversation with your medical provider. I get this question all the time. Do I need to get a colonoscopy? What about a different type of test? Have a conversation with your doctor. I know early detection is key.
It's really important information. Could help a lot of people. Thanks, Dr. Gupta.
Coming up, pride in the professional world. A new LinkedIn report shining a light on the challenges facing the LGBTQ+ community in the office.
When we come back, a look at the problem and what you can do to show support. You're watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. back. You may have experienced having your cell phone stolen at some point in your life. Here in New York City, it happens in places like the subway way too often. Well, that happened to our own Ellison Barber recently. But really, what's interesting here is where she actually found it. Take a look.
That is the NYPD with me, trying to get my stolen phone out of an Eco ATM automated kiosk.
I'll help you price and sell your device.
The company says it has more than 6,500 of these machines across the country where people can sell and recycle old devices for cash, possibly earning hundreds of dollars on the spot.
The condition of your device will affect the price.
But let's rewind. For me, this ordeal started on the subway on May 7th.
Personal phone was sitting, I guess, kind of where somebody could easily grab it, and somebody did.
Using my work phone, I texted my partner to check Find My Phone and lock it. I could see it went from a subway stop near the office to 29th Street, and it seemed like it wasn't moving. So the next day, we followed it and wound up at a check cashing store.
My iPhone pings to this machine, where I guess they sold it for cash and somehow didn't have to prove they actually owned the phone they were selling because it was accepted and it's been in here since yesterday.
The kiosks are supposed to offer a home for unwanted cell phones, but in my case, it was a stolen phone and one I very much wanted back.
So now we had to call the police to have an NYPD officer out working right now come here so I can file a stolen phone report with them.
The company says to get money for a phone, the seller has to appear on camera, scan their state-issued ID, and submit a fingerprint, which in the event of a theft is information that's shared with police. And Eco ATM says 99.8% of sales are from a phone's rightful owner. But in the case of a stolen phone like mine, the company has to give police access to the machine, which thankfully for me, since my phone was still in there, led to a sweet reunion.
Ellison, thanks for sharing your story. Well, Eco ATM says they are not incentivizing the stealing of phones. In the case of theft, like you just heard there, the company will give a person's ID, photo, and fingerprint to authorities, but then it's up to each police department to handle it from there. Certainly an interesting one.
Let's get you some money headlines. In a new survey, more Americans are sharing their take on tips.
CNBC's Savannah Hanau has that and other money news for us. Hey, Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yes, so nearly 2/3 of Americans have a negative view on tipping as the Senate takes up President Trump's budget bill that would eliminate taxes on tips. Now, a new survey from Bankrate finds 41% of people say tipping culture has gotten out of control and businesses should pay their employees better instead of having them rely on tips. A majority of people say the amount they tip is influenced most by the quality of service. A top research firm cutting its forecast for smartphone sales this year due to uncertainty surrounding U.S. tariffs. Counterpoint now expects growth of just 2%. That's down from an earlier forecast of 4%. Now, the move reflects challenges for manufacturers who are already facing weaker sales. Apple ships more than 220 million iPhones a year worldwide, with a fifth of total U.S. imports now coming from India and the rest from China. And a weaker stock market knocking some retirement investors out of the Millionaires Club in the first quarter. Fidelity says the number of 401k millionaires fell more than 4% from the end of last year to 512,000. The average balance for millionaires is $1.3 million. Now, the average 401k balance was $127,000. That's down 3% from the end of last year, guys.
All right, Savannah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, in honor of Pride Month, LinkedIn has released a new guide to help professionals in LGBTQ community navigate a complex and oftentimes threatening cultural climate.
It's called the Belonging Blueprint, and it's designed to help LGBTQ plus professionals find jobs and build their careers. Get this. Only 35% of queer professionals say they feel safe bringing their full and authentic selves to the workplace. And nearly 75% of folks have code switched at work, meaning they change how they speak or act or present themselves to fit perceived norms. reports.
LinkedIn career expert Andrew McCaskill is here with more details on this belonging blueprint. Andrew, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. So first, just tell us the details of this blueprint. What type of help, what type of resource can it be for people?
So we wanted to look at key points in your career journey for LGBTQ plus professionals. So before the interview, like when you're actually researching the job, once you're in the interview process, then once you get to the offer letter, et cetera, so you can make a really great decision. And then what happens when you get there, right? So much of turnover for LGBTQ plus employees really contingents upon feeling like they belong in the workplace. And so what we wanted to do is like, here's some great cues and tools for you that before you even go in for the interview, researching the companies, right? Does that company have leadership that is LGBTQ plus, right? And sometimes it might not be easy to detail that, right? So looking at, are there leaders from other historically or systemically marginalized groups? How people treat people from other minority groups, oftentimes is a canary in the coal mine for our LGBTQ plus employees. Also, where do they sit on some of the indexes for companies that LGBTQ plus people really trust, like GLAAD and Human Rights Campaign? So doing that research on the front end, but the biggest thing, phone a friend. Friends do not let their gay friends go to anti-gay companies, right? So reach into your network and say, who do we know who works there? And can they give me some insight on what it's like? And that's just the interview process.
Let's talk about some of the numbers here. We mentioned a few, but now 71% of LGBTQ plus professionals believe they've been passed over for a raise or promotion when they weren't code switching at work. And that's the tip of the iceberg, really. Yeah. What is the reality that a lot of queer people experience in the workplace?
Yeah, we saw that like over half of the people said that they really experience mental health challenges when having to code switch at work. And I think that oftentimes we think about, are people still coming out at work? Are they not coming out at work, right? That seems like so 20 years ago. But the sun does not rise in New York and set in LA and San Francisco. There are tons of people who work for small to medium-sized businesses all over the country that don't have employee resource groups and things like that. So what we wanted to do is like give people incentives to like, your professional network is just a community of people who are rooting for you to win. And you can use platforms like LinkedIn to find mentors and join groups on those platforms. If you're that manager in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and you might not have that community that's out at work, being able to find that online is a great way to do it.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about this concept of code switching. I mean, it really showed up in the survey. More than half of LGBTQ plus professionals say they have done this, especially during a job interview, specifically to improve their chances of getting hired. For anybody listening who's not familiar with that term, they've never heard it before, explain what it means in the context of the LGBTQ community, how it's not, everybody has to go to work and, be a little bit more professional than they maybe are on a Saturday night, but what does this mean for this community and how it can impact them?
It often means hiding parts of your identity or often means that people are trying to assimilate, right? And assimilation is exhausting. It leaves almost no room for creativity and innovation, and those are the things that our companies need from us most, and those are the things that get us hired and get us promoted. And so not talking about your partner at work or saying, instead of saying he, if your partner's a man, saying, oh, they, or, my person instead of my husband, right? So all of those things about hiding identity really impacts mental health. And one of the things that we talked about and looked at is once you're inside an organization and you're really trying to figure out how do you find your flock, is that allyship is so important. It's like, just because they're not a bunch of other members of the LGBTQ plus community who are there at work, one of the things that we found is that having an ally and allyship of people who were just supportive, who do things like they are sharing their pronouns, and their gender journey may not be a big deal to them because it's just one stop, right? But them using their pronouns is sometimes helpful, and even recruiters and hiring managers to do that is oftentimes a signal to prospective employees that this might be a safer space.
And it just makes you feel more like you can be yourself, you can be authentic because the people around you are going to accept you. It makes a huge difference. Great, thank you so much for bringing Andrew this to us. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good to see you. Coming up, a decades-old song getting a new life on TikTok.
You can ask the flowers. I sit for hours.
Now, when we come back, the story behind a forgotten song that has become a viral sensation. This is Morning News Now.
Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, a fiery war of words as billionaire Elon Musk lashes out at his former boss, President Trump. Musk now skewering Mr. Trump's massive spending bill, calling it a disgusting abomination just days after officially leaving the White House. And he's not the only one in Washington sounding the alarm over just how much it could add to the deficit. We're covering it all. Also this morning, the urgent search for justice in Boulder, Colorado, in the wake of that horrific rally attack that left a dozen people injured. The suspected attacker's wife and their 5 children now in ICE custody as federal officials look for answers. We've got the latest. Plus, the late spring storms wreaking havoc across America's heartland. That's on top of the suffocating smoke from those out-of-control Canadian wildfires now making its way east. Our Angie Lastman has your full forecast in just a moment. And later in the hour, why more and more older Americans are now using marijuana, the reason for that shift, and the big health risks that could pose. All right, we're going to begin this hour with President Trump's major spending and tax cut bill, which is now facing blistering criticism from billionaire ally Elon Musk.
Yeah, Musk blasted the bill on social media as a, quote, disgusting abomination. This is just days after leaving his job at the administration's Department for Government Efficiency. And the bill is seen as crucial to implementing the president's agenda, with Republicans currently trying to get it through Congress. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has the latest here. Hey, Peter, good morning.
Joe and Savannah, good morning to both of you. It is worth taking a step back for a moment and recognizing just how remarkable this moment is. Elon Musk, who spent a record amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, to help get President Trump elected and then was essentially gifted the keys to the castle to slash federal spending, is now days removed from that job and is slamming the president's signature budget bill, giving the bill's critics an unlikely new ally.
This morning, less than a week after leaving the White House, billionaire Elon Musk is attacking President Trump's signature spending bill.
An honor to be with Elon.
Musk launching a long string of posts yesterday. I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination, he writes, adding, shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. After President Trump has spent weeks lobbying his party to vote for the bill, Musk also posted, in November next year, we fire all politicians who betrayed the American people. And overnight writing that overspending will drive America into debt slavery. The White House responding yesterday.
The president already knows where Elon Musk stood on this bill. It doesn't change the president's opinion.
Some conservatives agreeing with Musk on Twitter, while another Trump ally, House Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, posted about a provision in the bill blocking states from regulating AI, writing, I would have voted no if I had known this was in there. As a whole, the bill would extend President Trump's 2017 tax cuts, with the largest savings going to the wealthy, direct more money to the military and border enforcement, while cutting social programs, including Medicaid. Independent analysts project, as written, the spending bill could add several $1 trillion to the deficit. Some Senate Republicans say that's too much.
I'm open to compromise on the bill. I'm just not open to supporting $5 trillion. This will in debt ceiling increase.
The president lashing out at Republican Rand Paul on social media, saying he has very little understanding of the budget plan. Meanwhile, the president's latest steel and aluminum tariffs went into effect overnight, doubling from 25% to 50%. The president's top target in the trade war remains China. Amid a series of flare-ups between Washington and Beijing, the president posting overnight, I like President Xi of China, but he is very tough and extremely hard to make a deal with.
The White House saying Presidents Trump and Xi are expected to speak later this week. And another headline here, the Pentagon just announced that it will rename a Navy ship that had been named after the celebrated gay rights activist and Navy veteran Harvey Milk. The announcement, of course, comes during Pride Month. The Pentagon says Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is committed to ensuring all names reflect President Trump's priorities, the nation's history, and what Hegseth calls the warrior ethos. Joe and Savannah.
Peter, thank you.
The man accused of attacking a group of people at a march in Colorado this week is expected to enter a plea in state court on Thursday. The suspect, Mohammed Sabri Solomon, is accused of injuring a dozen people who are advocating for the return of Israeli hostages. Now the suspect's family is in ICE custody. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky joins us from Boulder with the latest. Morgan, good morning.
Yeah, Joe, good morning. And officials are now calling this a targeted anti-Semitic attack. And the community here in Boulder absolutely rallying behind those 12 victims, 3 of whom we've learned are still recovering in a hospital. Now, as the man responsible sits in a Colorado jail cell, ICE has confirmed his wife and 5 children are in their custody. We do not know their immigration status, but officials do say they want to question them to see what, if anything, they knew about this attack Solomon says he planned for an entire year.
This morning, in the aftermath of Sunday's violent attack by Mohammed Sabri Solomon that left 12 victims burned and injured, a search for justice and answers. Solomon's wife and their 5 children are now in ICE custody, according to the Secretary of Homeland Security. The White House writing on X, they could soon be deported.
We're also investigating to what extent his family knew about this horrific attack, if they had any knowledge of it, or if they provided support to it.
According to his arrest affidavit, Solomon told authorities no one knew about his plans, and he never talked to his wife or family about it. After the attack, authorities were seen searching Solomon's home 100 miles away in Colorado Springs, where Solomon told investigators he hid an iPhone with messages to his family as well as a journal because he did not intend to live through the premeditated attack.
Never, ever thought this would happen here.
Ed Victor was part of the group walking to support the Israeli hostages in Gaza. The memory of Sunday's attack still fresh.
Felt heat, flame, someone on fire. Myself, 2 or 3 other people were just doing whatever we could to get this fire out.
You feel the heat, and the person next to you is on fire.
Yeah.
Among the victims, 88-year-old Holocaust survivor Barbara Steinmetz, now at home recovering. Speaking out for the first time since the incident, she tells NBC News she wants people to be nice and decent to each other, kind, respectful, encompassing. We're Americans. We are better than this. Steinmetz and 5 other victims are all members of Rabbi Mark Soloway's congregation.
It's been brutal, horrifying, exhausting, so many emotions.
How does your congregation move forward from this?
We're resilient people. We have beautiful traditions, and those traditions keep us going, keep us strong.
And this morning, we're learning more about a publication that did a profile on one of Solomon's 5 children. In this article, his daughter, who was a high school senior, shared that she was excited about moving to the United States several years ago with her family because it would allow her to pursue her dream of one day going to medical school. Joe?
Thank you, Morgan.
Well, the Midwest is bracing for more severe weather this morning after a series of intense storms swept through the region yesterday, causing flash flooding and spawning several suspected tornadoes. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster is in Independence, Missouri, just outside of Kansas City with the very latest.
Good morning. And much of the damage that we're seeing in this area is limited to the scene that you're seeing behind me. In this instance, the top of that tree falling off, crashing into this business. It's something that we saw happen to a home not too far away. Now, the National Weather Service will be in the area assessing the damage and trying to track the path of what they call a likely tornado as folks across the river are cleaning up from what we saw was extreme flooding.
Late spring storms hammering the heartland, a likely tornado touching down in Kansas City.
Water is just pouring over that car.
While in Wichita, this dramatic rescue caught on camera.
They've got her halfway out.
Firefighters battling fast rising waters, pulling a woman to safety through the window of her car. Colin Fee and Danielle Hart live on the street where it happened.
This is actually one of 2 water rescues that were going on at the same time.
The storm system wreaking havoc across the region. One woman posting on TikTok she was shopping at Whole Foods when tornado sirens went off, customers rushing into a freezer to stay safe. Heavy rains turning roadways into rivers. In Missouri, sirens warning residents to take cover, with wind whipping debris around the Kansas City Royals baseball stadium. This big rig toppling over into several lanes of traffic. East of the city in Independence, more ominous funnel clouds spotted. And as the NBA Finals prepares to tip off tomorrow night in Oklahoma City, thunderstorms in the area forcing the Indiana Pacers team plane to circle and land in Tulsa before moving on to OKC. Heavy rain also impacting South Florida, with downpours delaying flights at Miami International Airport for a second day.
I just kept getting delays on my phone.
Meanwhile, after causing misery in the upper Midwest, millions in the Northeast are now dealing with smoke from raging Canadian wildfires. The Minneapolis skyline blanketed in haze on Tuesday, with air quality in parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan receiving a very unhealthy rating.
And going back to that flooding, the National Weather Service saying the Kansas City area saw record-breaking rain, breaking a daily rainfall total that was set back in 2015. It's going to be a much better day here in the Kansas City area today, but you're going to see that wet weather extend east, affecting much of the middle of the country. Back to you.
All right, Jack, thank you.
For more on this storm system as it makes its way east, let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Yeah, Angie Lastman's here with a detailed look at all this for us. Hey, Angie.
Hi there, guys. Good morning to you. We've got a couple of areas that we're watching closely when it comes to rain. We've got one area that's this kind of developing low pressure that's off the coast of the southeast. This is going to bring us some heavy rain and potentially some flooding over the coming days. And then, of course, you just heard Shaq talking about the really busy weather over the past 24 hours. That's the cold front that you see chugging along to the east here, draped with that rain draped from basically Michigan back to parts of the plains. This is going to be something that we see through the day today in both spots. So that cold front bringing the rain from Michigan to Missouri, specifically the heaviest of it, and those thunderstorms. And then we have that area that we're going to keep a close eye on here for off the southeast coast. Just a 10% chance of that developing here as we get through the next 7 days. But either way, it is going to bring some rain across this region, not just today, but into tomorrow, specifically for parts of the coastal Carolinas. And that's where we'll watch for the potential of some flooding concerns. Now, the low otherwise will move to the northeast, and we'll keep an eye on that here in the coming days. Big picture look of your severe weather today. It's a lot slimmer than what we were looking at before. We're going to continue to be watching for that as we get through the next couple of days. Your severe threat is centered across Texas and New Mexico, and that's what we'll be keeping a close eye on. Now, temperature-wise, we're going to be seeing some warmer air settled into the northeast. You'll notice that across this region. There we go. We've got a high pressure that's sitting just off the east coast, and that means our highs are anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees above normal. And again, stretching from the Great Lakes to the northeast, you'll definitely notice. We had a little bit of a taste of this yesterday. Today, very similar. Mid-80s for New York City, Harrisburg into the upper 80s, Pittsburgh into the mid-80s as well. And we'll see those 90s, guys, in some spots across this region for New England, and maybe even a couple of records likely the warmest days of the year so far.
I'm fine with this.
Summer has arrived.
You're welcome. Yeah, until the rain comes again on like Saturday, right?
On the weekend.
Yeah. Thanks, Angie.
You got it.
In Russia, Ukrainian troops have launched their second ambitious attack in less than a week. Ukraine's domestic security agency said its troops attacked the Crimean Bridge. It's a road and rail link that Kremlin uses to transport military equipment. The agency says troops detonated 2,500 pounds of underwater explosives on one of the bridge's support structures. This comes just days after that extraordinary attack on a Russian airbase. NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now with more on all this. Keir, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. And two stinging attacks against Russia in just 2 days. And like those stunning drone strikes against President Putin's long-range bomber capability, this latest operation targeting that crucial bridge was months in the planning, Ukraine says, and it's the third time that bridge has been hit. This morning, after another explosive clandestine operation, Ukraine making a fresh push for US sanctions and security assistance, meeting officials and lawmakers in Washington. Hours after hitting the Kerch Bridge to Crimea, again, one of President Putin's prized possessions. And again, video of the attack recorded by Ukrainian special forces. Putin commissioned the bridge and personally opened it in 2018. The early morning blast from almost 2,500 pounds of underwater explosives placed by a pillar, the Ukrainian security forces say. Not as impactful as a massive blast that ripped the bridge apart in 2022, closing the crucial military supply and civilian road and rail line. We were there after it reopened 2 years ago. This is where that explosion hit this bridge. at around this time in the morning. And whether Ukraine's effort to force Russia to negotiate will work is uncertain. More details are emerging of Sunday's operation, turning trucks into Trojan horses, concealing drones that attacked multiple Russian long-range bombers. Analysis of video and satellite images suggests fewer long-range Russian bombers were hit than the more than 40 Ukraine initially claimed. And overnight, Moscow launching yet another wave of strikes against Ukraine.
That bridge operation was incredibly audacious, Joe. We've seen for ourselves how the Kerch Bridge is heavily defended, at least from air attack. This morning, the Kremlin saying nothing was damaged and accuses Ukraine of targeting civilian infrastructure. Of course, Joe, Russia has killed thousands of Ukrainian civilians. Joe.
All right. Yep. Keir, thank you so much.
Well, today, a key witness in Karen Read's retrial will be back on the stand as Read's defense team attempts to make the case that she's being framed for murdering her ex-boyfriend. A police sergeant will finish testifying about a critical piece of evidence from the SUV that prosecutors say Read used to strike police officer John O'Keefe before leaving him for dead. It comes after a tense dispute over DNA evidence yesterday. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett's been following all of this.
Hey there, guys. The point of almost every defense witness so far has been to offer an alternative explanation for how the victim died if Karen Read didn't hit him. But it's a risky strategy now on full display as the prosecution tries to pick apart each one. We want to warn you, some of the images you are about to see here from trial are disturbing.
This morning, Karen Read's defense marches on after the judge refused to grant her attorney's latest motion for mistrial.
The motion for mistrial is denied.
The dispute rooted in DNA evidence, with the defense attempting to convince the jury that Boston police officer John O'Keefe didn't die from a fatal blow by Read's SUV, but after she dropped him off at a house party with a German Shepherd.
I was asked to give an opinion about these wounds caused by a motor vehicle collision.
Forensic pathologist Dr. Marie Russell sparring with the prosecution.
Do you have any memory issues?
No.
Telling jurors these marks on O'Keefe's arm are consistent with a dog attack, not a car crash.
When you look at a photo like you do of John O'Keefe's arm, you're just eyeballing it based on your personal experience with dog bites, rather than relying on some type of scientific foundation that has been published and accepted in the community.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm going to allow that.
Isn't that fair to say, Dr. Russell?
No, absolutely not.
The prosecution also grilling Dr. Russell about the absence of dog DNA on O'Keefe's clothing, setting off a defense objection.
The defense moves strongly, vigorously for a mistrial with prejudice.
The judge ultimately denying that and allowing the questioning.
Now, when a dog bites a sweater, would you expect that it would leave DNA?
Yes.
When a dog bites a sweater, you would not expect it would leave little fragments of taillight shards in clothes, would you?
Correct.
Read outside of court projecting optimism.
How do you feel about the defense case so far?
I feel strong.
But also still appearing undecided about whether she should take the stand in her own defense.
I'm ambivalent, and by ambivalent, I could get on board with either one. I feel strongly either way.
As for who's coming up next here from the defense, they plan to call the snowplow driver who did not discover the body that night. Back to you.
All right, Laura, thank you.
Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. A little later, we're going to dig into how the FDA is now using AI to speed up approvals of certain medical devices, but it's not without some hiccups.
First, though, after the break, more deaths after Israeli soldiers opened fire close to an aid distribution center in Gaza yesterday. What both sides are saying about this latest deadly attack. Stay with us. Those stories and more are next. We are back with details of the chaos at an aid distribution center in Gaza yesterday that turned deadly. According to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, more than 24 people were killed after the Israeli military opened fire close to the center in the southern city of Rafah. The center is run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. That's a U.S. and Israeli-backed group that began operations just late last month. Well, now the group says they are shutting down aid centers today, after the IDF declared the area a combat zone. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us from Tel Aviv with more on this. Matt, good morning. So walk us through what happened yesterday and what Israel says is the reasoning behind this attack taking place so close to this aid distribution center.
Well, I mean, this is just another incident of bloodletting right at one of these new aid distribution centers, Savannah. And what we heard from the Israelis, they came out with a statement saying that they had fired warning shots at a couple of suspects, as they called them, who were approaching one of these aid stations in a way that deviated from the prescribed route. And if you look at how these are set up, there's basically a very, very specific way in which these people are supposed to approach. Somebody, I guess, according to the Israelis, had stepped out of line. They fired then into the crowd additional shots at these suspects as they approached the soldiers' position. So in this case, the Israelis acknowledged they did fire into the crowds. They said that they knew that there were reports of casualties, and they said that they're looking into the matter. We haven't heard anything else from the Israelis so far, but it sounds as though, like you said, 27 people killed, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, in the Gaza Strip, which is ruled by Hamas, and more than 160 people injured. So this was quite a lot of shooting if we're going to judge by those casualty figures.
Matt, the fallout from this has been swift. The UN is calling for an investigation into these attacks. Also, a U.S. consulting firm said that they have stopped working with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. What more can you tell us about the response?
Yeah, I mean, this is just the latest scandal on top of scandal to dog the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this U.S.-backed group that has some very murky financing and foundations. We don't know a whole lot about it. They haven't been particularly forthcoming. There's been a lot of reporting that has scrutinized how they were formed and whether or not they're essentially just a cutout from the Israeli government. But you mentioned that consulting firm. That's the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. You've heard of them. One of the biggest in the business. They said that they were doing pro bono work, helping to found this group back late last year, and then they pulled out just a couple of months ago. They said that there was additional work that they were doing pro bono on behalf of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and that then they severed that work, and that the person who was doing that additional work, and this was the sort of cryptic comment that we got from BCG, that they were put on administrative leave. So a very interesting turn of events on top of some of the other scandals that this group is facing. All of this coming out around the same time that we heard about this latest shooting incident at one of those aid stations.
Matt, as we mentioned, distribution centers will be closed today. What is the future of aid in the Gaza Strip?
Well, according to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, in a statement, they said that the aid is going to resume tomorrow. Now, we got an additional statement this morning from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They said that they're closing this in order to work with the IDF, in order to, they said, introduce measures that guide foot traffic in a way that minimizes confusion, develop clear IDF-issued guidance to help population transit safely, enhance the IDF force training, and refine internal IDF procedures. So basically, it sounds as though they're closing it down for a day in order to improve this and potentially, I suppose, reduce the incidence of these bloody confrontations now that we've seen the second one in just 3 days. Guys.
All right, Matt, thank you very much.
South Korea's new president is pledging to unite the country after months of political turmoil.
NBC's international correspondent Claudia Lubanga has more on that in other world headlines. Hey, Claudia, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Well, that's right. Lee Jae-myung, the candidate for the liberal opposition Democratic Party in South Korea, has won the country's presidential election. Now, he succeeds former President Yoon Suk-yeol, who was impeached and removed from office after he declared martial law in December last year. The new president now faces several immediate challenges, such as Trump's tariffs and North Korea's military buildup. It is still unclear whether his election will lead to changes in South Korea's foreign policy, but he vowed to develop the alliance with the U.S. and Japan. And let's go to New York now, whereas every year, 5 council members won seats on the United Nations Security Council, the UN body that deals with international peace and security. On Tuesday, the General Assembly voted for Bahrain, Congo, Liberia, Colombia, and Latvia to start serving a 2-year term starting in January. It will be the first time on the Council for Latvia, one of the Baltic countries that borders with Russia. Its foreign minister said the country will spare no efforts to achieve just and lasting peace in Ukraine and alleviate suffering in the Middle East, Gaza, and other conflicts around the world. And let's end this tour of the world in Beijing, where American agricultural products are being replaced in Chinese stores and restaurants due to the ongoing trade war with the U.S. Restaurants around the Chinese capital say that while the uncertainty over Trump's tariffs continue, they are now sourcing meat and other products from other countries. Dishes like the Great American Burger, for instance, is not American anymore. They are now making it with beef imported from Australia. Restaurants had to take other local delicacies off the menu too, like salt-baked chicken feet, because they say Chinese chicken feet don't taste as good as American chicken feet. Back to you guys.
Impacting everything.
Can't say I've had American chicken feet. All right. Thank you, Claudia. Appreciate it.
Coming up, it may sound like a comedy bit, but America's seniors are increasingly turning to weed for whatever ails them.
When we come back, we're going to dig into some new research on why and the potential health risks that could come along with using it. The doctor is in next. The FDA is testing out a new artificial intelligence tool designed to speed up reviewing and approving things like pacemakers and insulin pumps. There's a problem. Two sources familiar with the AI tool tell NBC News it's struggling with even simple tasks. On Monday, a separate generative AI tool called ELSA was rolled out to all FDA employees. Sources say that one has performance issues too. It's all part of a broader push by the new FDA Commissioner, Dr. Marty Makary, to integrate AI across the agency, but that has some experts concerned the technology is just not ready. NBC News health and medical reporter Berkeley Lovelace Jr. joins us now with more on his reporting on this. Berkeley, so the FDA directs all media inquiries to the Department of Health and Human Services, and I know a spokesperson didn't respond to NBC News' request for comments, so that leaves us with your sources. What are your sources telling you about the issues with this first AI tool that we mentioned?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, this is supposed to help with speeding up medical device reviews. And so right now I'm hearing it's struggling with pretty simple tasks. So right now users are unable to upload documents or submit questions. Currently it's not connected to the internet, and so it can't access new information like anything behind a paywall or new study articles. And so right now I'm hearing it's not very useful. I do want to stress, though, that FDA staff are really excited about the potential use of this technology, but they were given a June 30th deadline, and so now there's concerns that this could be pushed out before it's ready. Joe?
You wrote that one of the areas of government impacted, this is one of the areas of government impacted by the mass layoffs which were triggered under Elon Musk's Doge. So does it seem like this technology is about filling a staffing gap?
Yeah, so right now it's being pitched as a way to modernize the FDA and also to help with overworked staff. And so as you mentioned, a lot of the back-end support for FDA device reviewers were laid off as a part of the layoffs earlier this year. And a lot of staff that I've spoken with have been needing this additional help. But right now I'm hearing that this AI is just not smart enough yet to help with the complex work that they need to do this work. Right now it still needs a human behind it. Right now they still need to kind of triple check to make sure that a lot of this works, and so right now it's just really not useful for them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously dealing with buggy technology in beta testing is pretty common, but we're talking about pacemakers, something that goes inside your body. So considering how critical some of the functions of this department are, some of these devices are, what are some of the risks if this tool doesn't work as they want it to?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, these devices are critically important. These are devices that millions of people rely on to live. And so I'm told that there are no concerns that the FDA is going to approve something that it shouldn't because of AI. Right now I'm hearing that this is really just kind of very burdensome. Right now approvals take anywhere from 6 months to over a year to do. And this is being pitched as a way to kind of streamline that or speed up that timeline. And right now, reviewers are having to triple check their work with the AI. And so right now, it's actually slowing down their work. And so that's the primary concern right now, that this could slow down the approval of these devices that people need.
In the introduction, we mentioned another AI tool was already officially rolled out across the FDA. Very quickly, what are you hearing about that?
Yeah, so that's called ELSA, and that was rolled out on Monday. I'm also hearing that's having issues as well. When staff tried to submit questions of publicly available information, it summarized things that were wrong or only partially inaccurate. And so right now it's really just not useful for them. I spoke to one staff member who was using it, and he said he's really just not going to use it in his workflow right now.
All right, Berkeley, appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We're taking a look now at new research that shows a big rise in people using marijuana later in life. This is from the Journal of the American Medical Association. It looked at data that showed cannabis use among Americans age 65 and up surged by 46% from 2021 to 2023. 7% of people surveyed said they had used marijuana in the past month. That's about 1 in 14 people.
This rise happened as many states, of course, legalized cannabis, creating a booming commercial cannabis industry. Attitudes have also changed toward the substance to treat conditions like chronic pain and stress. But all that does have some doctors raising concerns.
For more on this, let's bring in our friend, NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, good morning. Some big numbers here. Let's get into some of these specifics. What did this research show about the changing trends in marijuana use among older people?
Yeah, Savannah, Joe, this was a survey of over 15,000 adults over the age of 65. Let's talk about women first. Amongst women over the age of 65, past month cannabis use, they asked over 2 years, how often have you used cannabis in the past month? It jumped from 3.2% to a whopping 5.3% over just 2 years. For men, we saw same age group over 65. It increased about the same, but a higher number overall, 6.7% to 9% over the same period. Maybe what's startling, though, Savannah, is the biggest jump was amongst higher income older adults. If you were an older adult over 65 and made more than an average of $75,000 a year, you had usage that basically doubled from 4.2 to over 9.1%. So this is, as you say, it's just a combination of greater acceptance and increased interest in both medical and recreational cannabis.
And one thing the data didn't tell us is why people are using it. Is it for medical reasons? Right. Is it for recreational reasons? Do we have some clues about why people are using the drug?
Yeah, the survey didn't delineate, as you mentioned, Joe, but it did kind of ask like what people were using it for, or people were able to self-report why they were using it, for example. And many cited, both men and women, both cited things like sleep, pain relief, some with anxiety. This is actually tracking with what I see in patients. So there's a strong kind of, I'll say, Joe, underlying medical motivation. And I think the stigma is fading. You know, what used to be even 5 years ago, mentioning that you were interested in dealing with your sleep with cannabis, you can go to any retail store now in states where it's legal, and you find these products kind of geared towards you. So I think that's a strong driver for this.
Dr. Patel, what are the big health concerns, though, associated with using marijuana? And is there anything specific later in life? Do you have advice for anyone over 65 who maybe is hearing this and thinks, okay, maybe I'm going to start using it?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I would just say that on average, people over the age of 65 tend to be on other medications to deal with either chronic conditions or just even medications like vitamins. I just want to warn people, over-the-counter medications like vitamins can even constitute an interaction effect. So no matter what, whether you're embarrassed, a lot of people are sometimes embarrassed. So I often just ask now, have you ever used cannabis or been interested in cannabis, just as a blanket screening question, because I want people to tell me, and it can interact with your drugs. Second, there's a lot, we've talked about this, Joe and Savannah, there's a lot of things that are marketed out there, and we're not exactly sure kind of what the product content is. So you could have a psychoactive component. As you get older, that effect can be exacerbated and can have, unfortunately, a worsening of the very symptoms that you're trying to deal with. You can see a worsening with anxiety. So what I try to tell people is make sure that you talk about it. There's none of us that are going to judge you for this kind of interest. In fact, we are likely to want to have that conversation with you. And I would just say, bottom line, start low, go slow, and make sure you look at your source.
All right, Dr. Patel, really good advice. Thank you so much. Coming up, could all those colorful food labels soon look a little different here in America?
When Morning News Now returns, the southern state looking to put some controversial ingredients in some of your favorite snacks front and center. That's next. Stay with us.
We're back with a story out of Texas that could shake up what you see on food labels and what's in some of your favorite snacks.
A bipartisan bill requiring warning labels on packaged foods containing certain ingredients found in popular products like Doritos, Skittles, and Mountain Dew passed the state legislature. Now it's going to the governor's desk. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has more.
This morning, a new potential state law in Texas could change the way Americans eat snack foods nationwide, requiring a warning label on many popular food and drinks, reading "not recommended for human consumption." It's targeting products using ingredients like bleached flour, food dyes, sweeteners, oils, and preservatives. Those are legal and common in many processed foods in the U.S., but some have faced regulation in other countries. According to USA Today, the proposed rules could impact a wide range of processed foods and drinks, from Doritos to snacks like Twinkies, Ruffles, and M&Ms, to breakfast cereal, to drinks like Gatorade and Mountain Dew.
Do the do.
If the legislation is signed by Governor Greg Abbott, Texas would become one of the first states to require the labels, potentially reshaping national food industry standards. The bill would mark a victory for HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his Make America Healthy Again movement. Kennedy testifying last month, saying that processed foods are a potential health danger for consumers.
The food industry really is not profiting from keeping us all sick, but it is keeping us sick.
Some food industry experts disagree with the legislation. John Hewitt, Senior Vice President of State Affairs for the Consumer Brands Association, urged the governor not to sign it, in a statement saying, quote, "The ingredients used in the U.S. food supply are safe," adding it would create legal risks for brands and drive consumer confusion and higher costs. This comes as some companies are working to remove artificial dyes from their products after the FDA announced a ban on red dye number 3 earlier this year. Testimony from a natural food company CEO last year going viral, showing how American companies are selling the same products without artificial dyes in other countries.
This is the brightness of the Canadian version, just for visibility. And this is the brightness of artificial food dyes.
Now, some food for thought on how standards could be shifting in the United States.
Our thanks to Sam for that report. Well, if you could wipe mosquitoes off the planet, would you? Scientists may soon have the power to do just that. A new gene editing tool called a gene drive is being tested as a way to eliminate mosquito populations by making future generations of female mosquitoes infertile. The goal is to stop the spread of deadly illnesses like malaria. Advocates say it could save hundreds of thousands of lives, but critics warn we might be going too far. Dino Grandoni joins us now with more on this. He's a reporter for the Washington Post who covers wildlife, biodiversity, environmental issues. Dino, good morning. This is such a talker here. In your article you just wrote, I understand you spoke to the lead researcher of the team developing what I just mentioned, this gene drive technology. So first, just explain to us how it works, how it ultimately could eliminate mosquitoes.
Yeah, the science is fascinating. These researchers have found a gene that will render female offspring infertile. And what really drives it is what you mentioned is the gene drive. It's a special genetic machinery that's able to have a greater than 50-50 odds of being passed to the next generation. As you probably know, for each one of our genes, when we have a child, we have a 50-50 chance of passing any one of them on to our kid. We have 2 copies of each gene. But with the gene drive, you can almost guarantee that a particular gene, even one that's not particularly advantageous to the offspring, is pushed to the next generation. So in this way, we're able to make all these female offspring infertile. And once that kind of builds up in a population, the population collapses.
Dina, some of these images of just like flocks of mosquitoes are like nightmare fuel here. But it's a real problem. Like, here's some information about just stats, how bad mosquitoes can be. The World Health Organization reports that nearly 600,000 people died from malaria. That was just in 2023. But mosquitoes, they can also carry other diseases, think West Nile, Zika, yellow fever. It's not just malaria. Scientists who support eradicating them say it could go a long way in saving lives when you hear those numbers. But let's talk quickly about the critics here. They say it poses this ethical risk. What did critics tell you about the ethics of using science to engineer animal populations? And I imagine there's a concern, like, where do you draw the line? What else could you do this with, and what does that mean?
Right. No, it's a scary thought. There are kind of 2 concerns to bring up here. One is, like, what is the ecological role of mosquitoes? How important are they for the food web? How many animals, like frogs, depend on them to survive, and without them wouldn't be able to survive well? So you have that question. But then kind of above that even, you have a question of intrinsic value, that each and every species on Earth has the right to be here, and do we as humans have the right to take that away from them, to just wipe any particular species out of existence? That's a bit more of a philosophical or even religious question, and that's where the ethical debate is right now.
The CDC says mosquitoes also, by the way, another stat here, the deadliest animal in the world, with over 3,700 species ultimately out there. Getting rid of them, I mean, it sounds like a huge task. The scientists that you talk to that are in the camp of this being a good idea, that it could save lives, how far do they think we should go to wipe them out? And is there any case for, I'm thinking of something like ticks, like another thing that can really be damaging to humans, to animals. Could we use this technology in other ways? Is there a conversation about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Gene drives can be used and are being investigated for all sorts of different animals. Another one is this screwworm that can infect cattle and humans. That's a compelling candidate for potential eradication. Another one is rats or mice that are on remote tropical islands that decimate songbird populations. There are some thoughts about using gene drives to help eradicate those rodents from islands. So there's a lot of potential uses for this sort of technology, which we're just kind of coming into understanding here.
I think a lot of people on the island of Manhattan just had their ears perk up at the thought of eliminating rats. Dino Grandoni, thank you very much. Really fascinating conversation. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
All right, be proud, be kind. That is the message behind the special edition Pride Month products from Beekman 1802, the now global beauty brand with more than $100 million in annual sales, an incredibly successful brand with humble beginnings. Its founders, Josh Kilmer Purcell and Dr. Brent Ridge, both lost their corporate jobs in the 2008 financial crisis and were no longer able to pay the mortgage on their farm in upstate New York. But thanks to their own tenacity, the kindness of their neighbors, and a herd of 85 goats, they turned their farm into a thriving business. Now the couple is sharing the key to their success in a new book titled Goat Wisdom. I love this. It will be available in stores on July 1st. We are excited to have both authors in studio with us this morning. Huge fans in my family of both of you, so this is just lovely to have both of you here. We're going to talk about the book in a second, but I do want to talk about your Pride collection right now, which is out. This is incredible because you teamed up with the Allie Forney Center, which really works to uplift LGBTQ+ youth, especially when it comes to art and creativity. Talk to us about, this is the second year you've done this collaboration, right?
The fifth year, actually.
Fifth year, my goodness, my goodness. Why it's so important to you and what it accomplished?
Well, this year was especially important. So the Allie Forney Center supports LGBTQ youth, homeless youth, in life skills and career efforts. And so what we did this year was we actually let the youth design our packaging. And so their designs are on our packaging for several of our products. And not only did they design it, but they were also able to follow the product through product design, through packaging design, so they learned about the skills of marketing a beauty product.
And now they get to actually see it on shelves, which I have to imagine is just an amazing experience for them.
They're their own entrepreneurs now.
Exactly. Well, speaking of, I can think of no one better to write a book about starting a small business, because we mentioned you guys it was the recession in 2008. You both lost your jobs. You were not experts in goat milk, as far as I know at that moment.
We were not farmers.
And yet you decided to make it work. Talk about why you decided to write this book, and what are some of the key things you wanted to pass
Well, we
along?
really wanted to inspire people who either had lost their jobs, they're in a difficult situation, and maybe people who never felt they had the confidence to do it. They thought, oh, I don't have an education or a background to do these things. What we wanted to say is you don't need any of those things. All of the things that you need to start a great business and build a great foundation for that business, you either already know, someone has told you all before, you just have to put it into action.
Yeah, you have all the degrees, right? And so you know, and despite that...
I can tell you, you don't need them. You don't need them.
I know one of the secret recipes to your success, you say, is kindness. Talk about that and why that's so important.
Absolutely. Every chapter in the book is sort of a different old maxim and how they apply to today's world and today's business, but the most important one is love thy neighbor. And that applies so much, even in the business world, because doing things that are fair and helping, your employees and helping the people, your vendors that you're dealing with, doing things that are fair is actually a business advantage, and one that a lot of businesses have lost sight of.
Another thing I know you write about is you are a couple in real life as well as business partners, and how you make that relationship work. What's some of the guidance that you have for balancing those two worlds and being so successful?
And sometimes not work.
And not work.
That's recognizing
key, right?
that. Exactly. Yeah, I don't know if we'd say we're balanced, but we do make it work. But no, we talk about this in the book. We have something called the 51% rule, and it's whoever has the most passion about a particular decision, they get that last remaining 1% vote.
And so you can say as much as you want, to contribute as much as you want up until that moment of decision.
You can yell up to 49%, but then whoever has the most passion gets the deciding vote.
And that works for you guys.
It
That's
works.
fantastic.
It'll work for anybody.
So many people were introduced to you through television, through the fabulous Beekman boys, and you were like the first couple on reality television, same-sex couple on reality television. What did that mean? How much of a barrier breaker was that when it comes, because that's how people become more comfortable with the LGBTQ communities, when they feel like they get to know someone, even if it's through television.
That's right, that visibility. And we were so proud of that program, are still proud of that program, because it wasn't a program about being gay. It was about two gay men who moved to a rural community and were learning to work with their neighbors to start a business together. And the fact that we never made it about being LGBT made it more accessible to a lot of the country that never had experienced representation, LGBT representation. So we called it stealth activism.
Does it feel like right now in this moment we need that?
Oh, visibility is always important. It's one of the reasons we always work with the Ali Forney Center. And we want to also thank our great partner, Ulta Beauty, for helping to give a spotlight on this program as well.
And all the corporations who aren't pulling back this year on their Pride support. This year, Pride means pride. You know, the fact that companies and individuals are going out there in the midst of a lot of headwinds against us, Pride is finally Pride again.
What does Pride mean to you? I'll ask each of you that.
I think pride really means being your authentic self and not being afraid to just get out there and speak your piece and write about it and work with other people. So just being authentic.
And pride means helping people and generations younger than you be proud of themselves, too.
And you can do that through this book right now, which so many people can check out coming up. What's the release date again?
July 1st.
Are you excited?
Very excited.
Because you've written books before. Is this your first book? Or
We've partnered on books before,
but
this is our first business book.
First business book.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. Dr. Brent Ridge and Josh Kilmer-Purcell, we're so grateful to have you with us this morning. Congrats on everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great conversation. Love the products. Coming up, for thousands of gamers across America, the moment they've been waiting years for. Nintendo's highly anticipated Switch 2 console officially hits store shelves in just a few hours. And we're digging into all the hype. That's next.
Our game on for Nintendo fans. Tomorrow, the gaming company is set to release its highly anticipated Switch 2 console.
Yeah, gamers have been waiting to get their hands on this latest tech. Some even waiting in line for months. How does that work to make sure they get their hands on it? NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung has more from the Nintendo store. It's right next door to us here at Rockefeller Center. Hey, Brian.
Hey there, Nintendo doesn't have pre-order numbers that they can share, but the original Nintendo Switch, which was released 8 years ago, sold more than 150 million units, and the Switch 2, with a bigger display and better graphics, has the OG fans so excited that some have camped out for months to get their hands on it. Gamers are ready to switch things up.
This is the most hype I've been for a console since the PS5.
With tomorrow's highly anticipated release of Nintendo's newest game console, lines we haven't seen since iPhone rollouts or even Black Friday sales, now anticipated for the Switch 2. Some shoppers making a game time decision to jump in line early.
And you are the first in line.
Yes, I am.
We met Christopher Evangelista outside of the Nintendo store here in Manhattan, who has been holding his spot with a team of people in rotation.
I slept in here a few nights. Just like upright, you just kind of pass it? I just pass out on my chair. What about when it's raining? We got the weather pod.
He staked his tent a while ago.
Number 2, 2 months.
Why not?
The games of Super Nintendo.
The new gaming system playing up the Nintendo nostalgia, bringing back actor Paul Rudd to his gaming roots as he recreated his 1991 commercial for the company.
It means something good.
To get your hands on a Switch, get ready to pay 2025 prices. Despite some concerns over tariffs, the company ultimately decided to keep the unit's cost as originally listed, just under $450. Although some gaming accessories saw an increase of $5 to $10. But on eBay, some pre-order confirmations for the console going for more than double the price. To help meet the sky-high demand, Best Buy announcing they'll be opening nearly all stores at midnight.
70% of customers indicated that they wanted to pick it up in store, and the vast majority of those customers will probably be there at midnight to do so.
So, okay, wow, that's a pretty big number. Are you kind of surprised by that?
Something about consumer electronics in general, and that instant gratification is really important.
Back at the Nintendo store, only confirmed reservations will get their consoles at midnight.
Raise your hand if you are guaranteed a Nintendo Switch 2. All right, raise your hand if you're not.
But those who still opted to camp out say it's all about the hang.
really it's just all about the community and sort of sharing that love of Nintendo with each other.
And if you weren't one of the lucky ones to get a pre-order confirmation for the Switch 2, Best Buy says they'll have a select number of units available at stores for walk-ins. They'll get inventory periodically thereafter, advising those that are hoping to score one for the holidays to sign up for restock alerts. Back to you.
Brian, thank you. Learning so much about him this week. Nintendo, Labubu.
Exactly.
He's a big toy guy.
I'm going to get mine in 2 years, I'm guessing, at this point. All right, that's going to do it for this hour. Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now.